thank you for having us here at the Washington State Trails Conference or Caucus. I'm Ben Donatelli. I'm with the Recreation and Conservation Office. I'll let Katie introduce herself.
Well, hey, everybody. I'm Katie Knight Pruitt. I'm also with the Recreation and Conservation Office, and I am so grateful to be here today. It's my first Trails Conference / Caucus, and I've learned a lot, so thanks for having me.
Thanks, Katie. And so we are here tag teaming this presentation. We're going to talk about the Washington State Recreation and Conservation Plan and the Washington State Trails Plans. And as we get ready to do that, I am going to share my screen and hit the share button. Okay. And can everybody see the screen?
Looks good.
Give a thumbs up from Katie. And can you hear me okay? I've had some trouble with my audio, I've been told, and I just want to make sure everyone can hear me okay.
You sound good to me, Ben.
Great. Thanks, Katie. All right. So agenda for our presentation. We're going to talk for maybe 10, 15 minutes about the Washington State Recreation and Conservation Plan, Washington State Trails Plan, and then we're going to, as Lisa mentioned, we're going to get into a little bit of a interactive part of the presentation, and we'll explain how to participate in that when we get there. We're also going to showcase a central hub that we've created for our community engagement process that we've developed for this planning work that we're working on. So excited to dive in. You know, one of the advantages of going last in this caucus is that we get to, one, thank all the presenters that have been a part of this today. Some really great ideas have been swirling around. I know my brain is spinning with all the fantastic conversations that have been going on all day today. So thank you to all of the presenters and participants. I know I've been scribbling furiously on my slide notes here, like all the themes that I'm sort of taking in from the day. And there's been a lot of stuff that I think is really timely and pertinent to as we are developing this trails plan and recreation and conservation plan, many of which have to do with issues of connectivity between communities, bringing the trails into our communities, access, reducing barriers to access, and access for all to have opportunities to get outside and recreate outdoors using trails or whatever other activities they want to participate in. And I think that access, we've heard a lot about reducing barriers of access, not just to the physical activities, but also to our grant processes. And certainly that's not a message that's lost on us. We recognize that there are significant barriers to accessing the funding programs. And that's one of the things that equity study that's been mentioned is gonna take a look at. Leveraging partnerships and each other's strengths and creating new partnerships is huge. And then growing the pie of funding opportunities. And I think we'll touch on that a little bit here. So a little bit about us as the Recreation and Conservation Office. And I'm going to try to paint in the lines a little bit. Megan did a great job of setting us up this morning, and really appreciate all of her comments and thoughts. Again, we're a cabinet level agency. We were established by a citizen initiative, a vote of the people, in 1964. We provide, as an office, staff support to 4 governor-appointed boards, 2 of which really oversee our grant programs. That's the Salmon Recovery Funding Board and the Recreation and Conservation Funding Board. The Recreation and Conservation Funding Board really oversees all of the trail programs that we have in our portfolio. So while we, as an agency, don't physically manage lands or recreation facilities, we really act as, I like to think of us as sort of the state's philanthropic foundation for grant making and promoting outdoor recreation opportunities and conservation of public lands. We manage a biennial capital investment budget of around 550 to 650 million. That's split amongst all the different grant programs that our agency administers, which there's about 29 different grant programs. So we have a huge budget. We have a very small staff, relatively speaking, in the state family to administer all of those funds. And 95% of that money hits the ground in the form of grants and goes directly out to support communities and all the great work that you all are doing on the ground. I think one of the really unique things about our programs is that all the grants are reviewed by citizen volunteers. We have a pretty extensive process of review and evaluation of those grant programs. And we have over 200 volunteers that help us review the grant proposals every 2 years and rank and prioritize those projects. So that said, we are always looking for new volunteers to help us rank and evaluate those grant programs. So if you're interested in helping us in that process, we would love to hear from you. Okay, so all of that out of the way, let me get to my next slide because I want to talk about what we're here to talk about, which is the statewide trails plan and the recreation and conservation plan. So these plans sort of set our statewide priorities for funding recreational trails across the state. I'm going to talk about the trails plan. Katie's going to talk here in a little bit about the SCORP or the recreation and conservation plan. They are co-aligned. They work together. They, as plans, sort of feed off of a lot of the same planning products, and I'll let Katie talk about what those are. But because trails weave together so many different recreational activities, this iteration, if you will, of the recreation and conservation plan is going to have a special focus on trails and trails facilities. This plan unlocks federal recreational trails program dollars from the Federal Highway Administration. And as I said, it's aligned with SCORP and the requirements that we have from the National Park Service to plan for the Land and Water Conservation Fund. So we have established a planning committee for the trails plan that is representative of trail user groups, land managing agencies, both federal, state, and local across the state. And what we do with the trails plan sort of picks up and dovetails in with the active transportation plan that Barb talked about this morning. So whereas they focus on the sort of paved trails, the inter-jurisdictional regional trails as transportation kind of facilities, we pick up the rest of the trails, if you will. So our trails plan looks at front and backcountry opportunities, urban, rural, regional, cross-state trails, motorized, non-motorized, summer, winter, water trails, anything that is trail related. That's what this plan takes a look at. So there's a lot of activities, there's a lot of interests involved. And, one of the things about this plan that I will point out is, sort of as Barb mentioned again this morning, this is not really a mile by mile implementation plan of how do we, put dollars on the ground. That's that's up to the local jurisdictions that are doing their pros plans and, dedicating specific resources within their communities. This is much more of a strategic and policy plan in nature. And so how do we fund and support as an agency all the great work that other agencies and trails organizations are doing? So in order to learn about what those needs are, we do a number of surveys as are listed on the slide here. And again, Katie's going to talk a little bit more about that. So I'm gonna, as we've gotten started with the Trails Planning Committee, we've had some early conversations around what are the things that we need to focus on as this trails plan starts to materialize? What are the major themes that we're hearing from our constituencies, from our communities, that really need to be folded into this plan to make it feel like a complete plan, both strategically and from a policy perspective. And so there's sort of 6 emerging areas that you'll see kind of represented in the surveys that we are conducting and the public outreach opportunities that we're putting out there. And those areas are around understanding user expectations and barriers to participation. How do we create a more accessible and access-friendly trails system across all those different trail use activities? How do we ensure equitable access to trail opportunities, specifically, for communities that have been underserved by trail opportunities, by trail recreation investments and infrastructure development. We've heard a lot today about overcrowded trails, about population growth, and the increased use that we've seen on trails, especially during this time of COVID. And so how do we accommodate that growth in trail use while also protecting the natural and cultural resources that we're all out there to enjoy? And so, and we've also heard a lot today about e-bikes. We heard a lot from Brian and guys at WOVA on e-technology coming into the motorized recreation opportunities. And so how do we modernize our trail infrastructure and support facilities to help accommodate those advances in technology? We've also heard today a lot about increased communication, collaboration with each other on communication and education, signage and wayfinding, all of those sort of communication and support activities, including enforcement. How do we collaborate on those more effectively as a state and state trails organizations? And then continually acquiring new and accurate data. This directly speaks to the, I think it's been mentioned earlier today, the database project, the Trails database that we are working on. I can touch on that a little later in the presentation if folks are interested, but we're working behind the scenes to kind of develop the back end of what this new data system will look like and how, what opportunities will there be for people to contribute new data to a comprehensive state trails database, and as well as how can the public effectively access that data. So that's a little bit about what we're looking at with the trail plan. I'm going to hit pause on that, and I'm going to let Katie talk a little bit here about the recreation and conservation plan. So Katie.
Thank you. All right, just looking at a question there in the chat. Okay, we'll address that in just a second there, Jeff. So hi, everybody. I'm, again, Katie Knight Pruitt, and I'll just give a quick overview on sort of the umbrella for the Trails Plan, which is our recreation and conservation plan. And I think it's confusing a bit when we show the acronym of SCORP, and then it doesn't obviously work out to do that acronym. So I'll just explain that real quick. So the SCORP acronym comes from the National Park Service, and that's the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. And so Washington State, we call the plan our recreation and conservation plan. But that federal nexus is that what Ben alluded to is unlocking federal land and water conservation funds. And then the plan development is also funded in part by the National Park Service. So that funding is also helping to fund the update to the Trails Plan. I think of SCORP as, kind of this umbrella that covers all these different activities in the state. So athletics, obviously trail usage, a variety of different trail usage, boating, anyway, all local parks, it just all the things that RCO funds and more. We try to cover all outdoor recreation. Now this, I also think of the trails nexus as the trails plan is the connection, right? To get to most of these places, we want trails in place. So trails is like integrated and part of all of the other activities that RCO funds. So the SCORP document itself is, really the long range plan, the comprehensive plan for everything within RCO statewide. Just also want to give a little bit of background on kind of the planning update timeline. So this is every 5 years, we have to update this plan to maintain that eligibility for those federal funds. But this is also part of the statutory mission of the Recreation and Conservation Funding Board to develop SCORP. So there's no timeline in our state statute, but we use the federal 5-year to do the update. Our last plan was adopted in 2018. And so right now we're working on the 2023 plan. And the timeline, we started working in earnest this spring with the formation of planning advisory committees. And Ben talked about the Trails Advisory Committee, and there's also one for SCORP, which we call our steering committee. And that includes agency land managers, tribal governments, conservation and community nonprofits, and board members that advise plan development. And I also want to talk about the planning products that you see up there on the screen. So our steering committees are advising the development of a number of planning products that are delivered through this comprehensive plan. So the first is an assessment of outdoor recreation demand and need. And we do this through a statistically significant demand survey that goes out to a blind, well, not a blind, excuse me, it's a random sample, a representative of the state population. So, and Jeff's comment that he wrote about the experience survey, I'll talk about that in just a second. But this demand survey really gets at all the unique activities. And this goes out to folks that are anonymous to us, again, representative of the state. And we have that from 2018. And then the data we're collecting for this plan will also be able to compare to that. And this year, we've also developed a new experience survey, which is not really focusing on activity, or it's not intended to. We're trying to supplement more the quantitative data that we get in that demand survey with really qualitative information to engage the public around experience. And really, we're really specifically targeting the issue of equity. So there are a lot of user groups that we haven't heard from in past developments of the plan. And so we're really making an effort to reach out to those communities. And then we also have the mapping products that come out of SCORP. So we have an inventory that we update as frequently. We've updated actually more than every 5 years, but we're working on a big update right now, and we'll be reaching out to a lot of the land managers to help us verify some of the data that we have in that. And then we do an analysis of access with that. So kind of a level of service, looking at what facilities are within maybe a walking distance, and also different drive times, and then based on population density. Policy priorities are also part of the plan, and this is the big piece of the plan that you can see there on the slide. Those are policy priorities that were developed for the 2018 plan: sustaining our legacy, improving equity, getting youth outside, addressing changing demographics, and then asserting recreation and conservation as a vital public service. So each of these priorities are kind of these big picture, and then we have these recommendations that come out of that then we work on doing adjustments to our grant evaluation. Those are the things you might see in the manuals. And so that's all folded up in what we call the unifying strategy, which is really the action plan for SCORP. All right, next slide, please, Ben. So the steering committees, the first thing we worked on was developing an engagement strategy. And this is really building on what we've done in the past, which was we kind of had our historic methods were doing a lot of stakeholder involvement with recreation user groups and land managers, and then doing, once we had a draft in place, going out to the general public. So this time we're really shifting that, and we're starting off with outreach early on. So we haven't drafted any priorities yet. We're not working on the recommendations yet. We're actually pushing out not just our demand survey, but we're also doing this experience survey where we're really wanting to hear from groups that we haven't historically spoken to, like I mentioned, those being communities of color, persons with organizations that represent persons with disabilities, some of the ethnic commissions are some of the groups that we're reaching out to. So we've been having introductory conversations and trying to tailor our participation based on community needs. And these really, these initial conversations really helped us realize, well, we need sort of a method to reach out. And so that's how we developed the experience survey, which really is about, what do you look for in a quality experience? What prevents you from participating? What changes would increase your participation? So it is targeted, meaning that we have some specific groups that we really want to hear from, but we're also encouraging any resident in Washington State to take the survey so that we can learn about everybody's experience. So it's really a convenient sampling. It's not statistically significant, but it will have demographic input to give us a sense of how representative it is. And one comment, some of the initial links when we sent this out, I saw that, Jeff, that you can't, sometimes you can't, there should be open-ended options at the end of the questions, but some Android users are having trouble with that. So we've corrected the links now, and we'll show that in a minute on our hub site, so that it's not just iPhone users that are having access. And then that survey is going to be open through November 14th. All right, next slide, please. So our next sort of outreach tools that we're working on. So we're going to have a provider survey going out to land managers, and we've done this in the past with our updates to the statewide plan. So we're really refining a lot of those questions, though, based on things that we've already heard from folks and stuff and information we've received. There's a lot of land managers that are on the steering committee. So this is really looking at what are some of the important issues that you're facing as a land manager, and then the challenges to meet that demand. And then we're going to be creating a separate survey for tribal governments, and this will be a first time using this approach, but recognizing the unique role of tribal governments, both as a provider and the interplay between recreation use and treaty rights. And then finally, as I mentioned, we have that the resident demand survey. So this is run by Eastern Washington University, and then it'll be randomly distributed by our target data is right before Thanksgiving. And this is the comprehensive, what do you do, where do you do it, and how often? So one challenge with this survey is that in 2018, everything was based on what did you do in the last 12 months? And we're planning to use that approach, but then also have some COVID-19 pandemic type questions because of that increase in use. So the data is going to be really skewed at this point in time. So we are aware of that and trying to figure out some solutions to that. I think that is all that I have to share on community engagement. And just real quick, I want to give kind of a overview of the timeline, because I forgot to mention that. So the plans are due to be updated by the end of 2022. And so the SCORP, statewide recreation plan, goes to the governor's office for approval. And then it goes to the National Park Service. And so in that process, we're doing the survey work, and we plan on shifting to the priorities and the recommendations in the beginning of 2022, and then having some more public engagement late spring, early summer next year. All right, and with that, Ben is gonna give us, or I'll talk us through, and Ben will do a little demo here of our hub site that we're using for our SCORP engagement. And I also want to stick this in the chat so I can figure out how to do this. Okay, so everybody should have a link to that site now. So this, is it opening up for you, Ben? Oh, there it is, great. So at the top of this, and this is if you open up on a desktop or a pad, you'll see on the menu there that has the take a survey, and then the white underline that Ben's showing there is for the survey in Spanish. So that's a real, we try to make the surveys as easily accessible that way. And then there also, if you're on a phone, you do have to do a little drop down on the menu. But this whole site. Oh, and then pinning, he was just showing that you can pin a spot on a map. We don't want to forget that. We are asking folks to pin their favorite spot, give us a little story about it. upload a photo if they can, because this will help us just in telling the story of recreation use in Washington State. And then Ben, go ahead and scroll down, and then we just give a little information, kind of runs like a storyboard on this site, and then more information on the surveys. And our provider survey will be going here as well when we get that out in the next week or two. And we'll be doing another kind of email push on that. Keep going down. All right, and we have some maps. So we have a recreation provider inventory map that we're going to ask those land managers to help us verify the data. So this is data we purchase from Washington Hometown to populate as many sites as we can, Washington State, and then we use that for our analysis of access. And then the 2017 Trails database. Ben, do you want to say anything about that?
Gotta find the unmute button, but yes, thanks,
Sure.
Katie. So the database that is up here is the existing state database that was developed in 2017. It was actually started in 2013, I think, with the partnership project between RCO and the Office of Chief Information Officer, where they, sent a call out for to far and wide across the state and asked to collect as much trails related GIS data as they could find. They went through a process to try to normalize that data into a consistent sort of features and attributes of the trail system, and then published it. And there it has sat since about 2017. So it's a static picture of what existed in terms of as much GIS information as they could collect at that time. The project that I mentioned earlier and that's been mentioned today for us to update that database is a really exciting opportunity we have. We've received some funding from the legislature to not only update it, but create a sort of new system that will allow us to maintain and keep that information up to date throughout time moving forward. And so it's a really great collaborative opportunity to work with all the other state agencies, federal agencies, and local land managers who have GIS data on their trail systems to kind of bring that all into a comprehensive database. And so we're working on that, as I mentioned earlier, and you'll probably hear more about that early in the new year as we start to roll out part of that process for developing the database. So I'll quit with that for now.
Great. Well, looking at the time, I think we should probably move on to our engagement activity. The rest of the site is some frequently asked questions, and then we have a planning timeline, and then an opportunity to join our email distribution list is also there at the bottom. And I just want to also really quick give credit. So Ben and Bob Eulis, who's in our IT department of RCO, developed this site. We were inspired by the state of Rhode Island creating a kind of a hub site for their SCORP development. And they put this together really quickly. And I think it's going to be it is a great engagement tool. So I just wanted to say, give Ben some props there. All right.
Thank you, Katie. Okay, so we're going to change gears here a little bit, and we may have to go through this relatively quickly, and I'm going to get to the first slide because this is not the right.
And I went ahead and put this in the chat too.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you have two screens, fantastic. This will be really easy. You can also access this through your phone. What we have here is a Menti, it's called. And this is a new tool to us. We're kind of learning how to use it. So thank you for being our guinea pigs, and please bear with us as we go through it. Appreciate your grace so far. So if you go to menti.com, either on your phone or on your computer in a second screen, and enter the code that you see on the slide, which is 80644420. You'll be able to access the questions that will feed into this survey. And so as we go, you can see it starts to populate live data. And we're asking you, how would you rank Washington State trails overall? We're already seeing data coming in. So this is fantastic. There's some Menti pros out there, so maybe we can get some tips from folks later on. And so we'll give people about 30 seconds to get responses into this survey, and I'll try to manage the chat as well. Thanks, Katie, for entering that into entering the code and the thing into the chat there. I forgot I don't have a timer, so I don't even know what 30 seconds is anymore.
Probably about there, but I noticed there's 83 participants and only about 40 answers. So I don't know if we want to give it another 30 seconds or maybe folks are not able to participate.
It's like we've sort of got 40 participants, 42. Okay. Well, thank you. Let's move on to the next question. In 1 to 3 words, how does spending time on trails make you feel? You should be able to type into the text box there. Give folks about 20 more seconds. All right. That's fantastic. That's fun to see. Let's move on to the next one. Oop. So, during the past year, in which of the following trail activities did you participate? You should be able to select more than one, I hope. All right, about 10 more seconds. All right, thanks everybody. During the past year, which of the following winter activities did you participate? About 10 more seconds. Okay. Are there any activities that we missed? Give folks about 30 seconds on this one. Water trails, yeah. I noticed that yeah, sorry about that. Target shooting. Oh, great. Thanks for your feedback, everybody. So approximately how often do you use trails for recreation or transportation? About 30 seconds on this one. All right. Awesome. A lot of daily and weekly trail users out there. Thanks, folks. So what has prevented you from using trails in this past year? We'll give people a little bit more time on this one because I know there's a lot of choices. It's like we're topping out there. Take about 10 more seconds on this one. Great. Thanks, folks. Next question. What are the 3 most important reasons why you use trails? And I couldn't put in other in this part of the survey, so we'll get to that. All righty. About 10 more seconds on this one. Okay, moving on. What concerns you most about the state trails system over the next 5 to 10 years? Again, give people a little more time on this one. All right, take about 10 more seconds on this one. Okay, move on. So what opportunities should be prioritized over the next 5 to 10 years? Again, you can select up to 3 on this one. About 10 more seconds on this one. Okay. What other concerns, opportunities, or challenges should be prioritized? What did we miss? And I see there's a lot of great messages in the chat as well, so really appreciate those. Take a couple minutes on this one and tell us, what did we miss? Because I know there's a lot. It's a fine line in developing these things to try to capture a broad range, but also make it digestible. About 30 more seconds on this one. Lots and lots of ideas on here. This is great. All right. Thanks, folks. I think this is our last slide. What other questions should we be asking of people? About 20 more seconds on this. Some great questions. Don't be surprised if you see some of these come back as in another survey. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. This has been fantastic. Really appreciate the feedback. We recognize that we couldn't fit all of the possible concerns or issues or thoughts in, but this is really helpful as we go forward. Will help us craft more opportunities for engagement. And I think this is really valuable feedback for our committees to consider. So before we sign off here, I just want to leave you with our last slide, which has links to the website that we showed, links to the surveys, the Map Your Favorite Place survey that Katie mentioned, as well as our contact information. And we'll make this presentation available to Jacob and Lisa, the conference organizers. And yeah, I know the trails and trials, that's one I struggle with every single day, the spelling. So sorry about that for any of those misspellings in there. But thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. We really appreciate it. Thanks to the organizers. Katie, do you have anything you want to say before we sign off?
No, I'm really looking forward to having some time to digest those Menti responses. So thanks, everybody.
All right. And with that, we'll turn it back over to Lisa and Jacob. Thanks, y'all.